wanna get lost, don't wanna grow up. I want to climb the tallest mountain ever, just to test my luck.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Time will come, when days will go, what the future holds. Only God can know, gotta tough it out, I need to stay strong. Tell the music I've been given one more song.
And I know what isn't good for you.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Matt here, back with another video. Today we're talking about the Fujifilm 18-55 kit lens. I have it here on my newly bought XE2, which I have been loving. I will eventually review, but honestly, for this to be called a kit lens, it's kind of a shame, because compared to every other manufacturer's kit lens, this is so many leagues above the competition. I would just really consider it a really well-valued mid-range zoom lens rather than a kit lens, but it is by definition a kit lens, but you know what I mean. Just like all Fuji XF lenses, it has a really nice metal construction. The zoom ring is very nice and smooth, even after I've owned it for well over a year, and the focus ring is nice and smooth, although it is focused by wire, so it really doesn't matter. It's going to be jumpy and weird anyway. The biggest benefits of this lens, in my opinion, are obviously the versatility of having all those focal lengths, but also the optical image stabilization that's built into it. I think it's 4 stops, which makes it very, very usable for video, and as you'll notice at the beginning of this video, I have mostly video examples and not many picture examples from this lens because I mainly use it on my gimbal or for moving shots in videos. It has the aperture ring, the classic Fuji aperture ring, but because of the fact that the maximum aperture changes on this lens as you zoom in, it doesn't have the number marks on it. At 18 millimeters, your maximum aperture is f2.8, and when you zoom into 55 millimeters, your maximum aperture is f4. Because of that, the aperture ring just goes on forever because it can't have numbers on it, because if you set it to a number and then you zoomed in, the number would just be wrong. And it doesn't stop anywhere. Even though it does click, it just goes on forever. This was the first Fujifilm lens I ever bought. I got it with my first Fujifilm camera I ever bought, which was a brand new X-T3 with the kit, including the kit lens, which I implore you, if you're going to buy a brand new Fujifilm camera and it has a kit like that, it's almost always worth it to just go for it and get the kit lens involved, especially if this is the kit lens. If it's an XC kit lens, I don't know as much. I've never owned an XC lens, or I did for a very short while because I got it with an X Pro 1 that I bought, but then I sold it off basically immediately. But yeah, if you can get this, if you're gonna buy a new camera anyway, like an X-T3 or an X-T4, just go pay the extra couple $100s and get this because it's a great value. If you buy this brand new just by itself, I think it's something crazy like $650, $700, which is not worth that much money. You can buy it used for $250 to $300, but if you're gonna buy a new thing anyways, you get what I mean. Just pay the extra couple $100s and get the best kit lens in the world. The only other kit lens I've ever owned was with the first real camera I ever bought with interchangeable lenses, which was a Nikon D3300. I got that with the kit with the 2 kit lenses, which it had a mid-range zoom and a long telephoto zoom. And both those lenses were just cheap and plasticky and had really not good image quality, and the maximum aperture wasn't anything like this. This also has a really good maximum aperture for a kit lens. A big thing that people are gonna debate between, if they're gonna just get a one and done lens, mid-range zoom, they're gonna be between this 18-55 and the Fujifilm 16-55. And there are just a minor few differences. The main things being that the 16-55 obviously goes to 16, which is just marginally wider, really not that much, but it has a constant aperture of f2.8. So as you go and zoom in through the range, your maximum aperture doesn't close down. That's just because it costs so much more to manufacture a lens that has a zoom range and keeps that maximum 2.8 aperture. That's why that lens is so much more expensive than this lens. It also has weather sealing, but that lens doesn't have stabilization as far as I know. Because of that, I don't really consider the 16-55 lens. I think the only people really in the market for that lens that can really justify paying that cost, because from what I've heard, it's basically like having 4 primes and 1 lens. I think really that would just be for like wedding photographers and not really videographers because of the lack of stabilization. But even then, even though I only shot 1 wedding, I found that if I were restricted to a 2.8 lens at the time, my ISO would just be crazy. So I would prefer to have a couple wide aperture primes over a constant f2.8 16-55 anyways. So in my opinion, the 16-55 is not worth it, but let me know in the comments if for some reason that is the perfect lens for you. I don't have a ton to say about this lens. It's really great at what it does, but in my opinion, for photography, I don't find a zoom lens very inspiring. Maybe that's not you. There's all these different ideologies to how to go about photography. You might be the kind of person that just wants 1 lens and you don't want the headache of constantly changing lenses, and you just want the most versatile thing, which I think this would be the way to go because it's right in the standard range of focal lengths, and it just got you covered for versatility. But in my opinion, for strictly photography, I prefer to shoot with primes because it makes me think more about my composition. And even just the past week where I've been like trying to get myself to use this lens to get some photo image examples, I've immediately found myself being more lazy whenever I just know that like I want to take a picture of that hay bale over there, but it's over there. Okay, I'll just zoom in. It just becomes so much easier to rationalize that because the human brain generally goes for the path of least resistance. So forcing yourself to shoot 1 focal length, in my opinion, is really great for opening up more creative possibilities. If you've never owned a prime lens, I implore you to, try one out. I'll just show you a couple things here. As I said earlier, the biggest thing for this is the versatility. I personally like using it for my gimbal footage, mainly because it's stabilized, but also because even this zooming in isn't enough to throw the gimbal off balance. But if I were to be using prime lenses on my gimbal, not only would it be less stabilized because I use an X-T3 for video and I don't have IBIS, but every time I would want a different focal length, I would have to change lenses if I were shooting primes and rebalance the gimbal. So this is just the ultimate way to go as a gimbal lens, in my opinion, if you're going to be shooting a Fujifilm, especially an X-T3 or an X-T2 or some video rig that doesn't have IBIS. I find that 18mm, this distorts pretty badly. You'll find buildings are at weird angles at the edges of your frame and stuff, and I think that's just to be expected, that you're not going to have a ton of corrections when it comes to a lens with so many different focal lengths that it's covering. So here for fun, I decided to take the same picture of my dog at 18mm, 23mm, 35mm, and 55mm, which are all the marked focal lengths on this lens. And you'll find that between 18 and 23, you'll just notice that there's a lot less distortion in that, like, it isn't exaggerating features, which this is just a really good real world example of like why wide angle lenses are not flattering for portrait photography. And between 18 and 23mm is really not that much of a focal length difference, but at 18mm my dog's nose is a lot longer, or it seems to be a lot longer than it does at 23mm. And then you'll just see at 35 and 55mm the effects of compression starting to set in, where instead of things being elongated, they're more flattened, and that's generally more flattering, especially for portraiture of human beings. So that's all I really have to say. It's a really great lens. I personally don't find it inspiring for photography. I already talked about why. I think it's a great option for video shooters, or if you're the kind of photographer that really just prefers to have a one and done lens and you don't want to be messing with a bunch of primes. So that's a completely valid ideology and a valid way to go about photography. So if that's you, this is a great lens for you. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Leave a comment down below. Check in with me. Do you like this lens? Do you prefer shooting with zooms? Do you prefer shooting with primes? And why? Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.